Hey guys, I have a new video for you, as you can see, obviously. This was recorded almost a month ago, but I've only gotten around to finishing it now because of life, life. If you don't want to hear my rambling and attempts to describe what I'm doodling, I would suggest putting on some nice music instead and just watch along. Muting me is definitely okay. So, first of all, I would like to say thank you so much for your feedback and really helpful comments on the other video I did and on DeviantArt. It's really inspiring and has helped me through my recent art block. So yes, thank you. It's truly appreciated. This sketch was an attempt to kill that art block, so to speak, by simply doodling, and it was a part of a 2 hour sketching session. And originally I intended to include the first sketches I had done to show you guys how many things I actually discard before I get something proper done. But in the end, it ended up being a really long video, so I decided to just focus on this piece instead. It is sped up around 8 times, so it was actually sketched out quite slowly, as you can see here. And that's the annoying thing about watching most drawing processes on YouTube. It's really easy to think that sketching or drawing really fast is the way to go, and I know that my mind gets sort of tricked into thinking that it's the right way of drawing, but in order not to make hour-long videos, everyone tends to speed them up. So yes, back to super speed here. So like I was saying, this was an attempt to get rid of an art block, and I find that there are several ways to do that. And one is to listen to a lot of different music while doodling, all types of music. Two is to just stalk really inspiring people and see how they draw and what they draw until inspiration strikes. And three, what I end up doing most of the time is to change your drawing style or method a bit. So for instance, if you've been drawing a lot of values or colors and not focused that much on line work in a while, you can try to go back to just using lines to define everything. Or if you've been planning everything out in your drawings lately, anatomy and clothing and hairstyles and so on, just try to ignore that and just doodle random things and see where that takes you. And that last part is certainly what I did here. Nothing is really planned in this drawing. What interested me was the movement created by the scarf initially, and that was basically the only thing that made me wanted to continue working on this drawing. I struggled a lot with the face and a lot with the arm and hand, but I think in the end it was worth it, and without that initial sense of movement, I don't think I would have even gone that far. The other thing I wanted to do with this piece was to give it more of a pencil feel and try to get some really rough shading into some of my sketches to add more life or depth. And so I have used a tiny brush with the opacity set to around 60%, and then after the initial first strokes I used an even tinier brush to add in the details. I have not used more than 4 layers for this piece. There is the sketch layer, and then I have a backup layer of the sketch, just in case I mess something up or want to go back and alter something. And then I later added on an extra layer for the background and one for the design of his facial markings or tattoos, which we'll get to, because I'm not good at all at drawing tattoo designs. I have a friend who's really good at them, and her drawings are really inspiring, but my problem is that I completely forget that a face is not just a flat surface, so I need to of course curve the tattoos to where the chin is and such, and yeah, I forget. But in this drawing I think they actually ended up looking quite alright. I normally create extra layers if I have to put in something on top of areas that I'm already happy with, or perhaps areas that are quite detailed, and that is of course to avoid messing things up. But I usually don't like to sketch on too many layers, and well, that's mainly because I hate having to spend time looking for the right layer, the layer where certain lines are, and especially when my computer is struggling with both Photoshop and recording the screen, then having a bunch of layers are really not that helpful. And the other reason for limiting layers is that it forces me to care less about my drawing, which I find really useful somehow. And it's not that I don't like my drawings, but I find that if I get too attached to them and too obsessed with getting every single detail right, it turns into more of a struggle, and I usually end up getting quite disappointed with the result, or I get frustrated during the process. So what I found to be really helpful is to not be afraid of discarding sketches. Not necessarily deleting them, but perhaps not finishing them either, or maybe just delete parts of them that annoys you and start over. And I think working on one layer makes it much easier to just delete things and not obsess too much about details. Yeah. I think I mentioned this in the last video as well, but that is actually, to me, one of the main points of practice. To me, practicing gives me the confidence to delete things and start all over. So for instance, if I like a face I've drawn but something is not quite right, I have hopefully practiced so that I feel confident that I can redraw it from scratch. And especially if I'm working digitally, I have recently tried to make a point of deleting things I'm not happy with and just try to figure out why they didn't work, and redo them. I do tend to keep most of my drawings though, unless they're just a few uninteresting lines, because I think it's really helpful to go back and see my own development and process. And I absolutely love when artists leave their old stuff up online so you can see how they've progressed over time. I think it's really inspiring and motivational. So as you can see, half of the video has just been me figuring out the face and the hair and really truly struggling with that face. And that is of course the downside of not planning anything and just go straight to the clothing. It makes it easier to mess up proportions and to lose the general idea of where the neck is or the back of the head is and so on. So sometimes it's helpful to add in an extra layer and with a brightly colored brush just mark the different sections, get the anatomy straight. Though I don't think I did that here, which is probably why it took me forever to figure out the face and such. So when that is done, I went on to draw the rest of the body, and I always try to figure out the face first, because for me, if I'm not happy with the face, it doesn't matter how amazing the rest looks. Somehow, the face is important. My clothing designs have lately been a lot of loose fabric because I decided that falls are fun, and loads of belts and straps and such, and mostly I think this is simply because it adds a nice amount of detail to my drawings without me having to plan too much. And since I've struggled quite a bit with details in the past, I think it's a nice way to get used to them. So I hope it makes sense. The point is that I haven't really got a finished design in mind when I draw at the moment. I just use some really loose and sketchy lines to try to figure out what I want the clothing to look like, and if the lines look alright, then I just try to add a bit more detail to them. Nothing refined or anything, but just really sketched out bits and pieces, like the straps under his shoulder. That I think was just a part of the original sketch of the body that was turned into some clothing accessory or something. In this drawing, I found it really helpful not to focus too much on the anatomy, which really shows in the end, unfortunately, but instead try to focus on the clothing instead and let it shape the body. if that makes sense. I really hope it does. For instance, I really struggled with the anatomy of the arm, and I could not see how it was supposed to look. And in the end, what I did was to draw the braces, or the whatever it's called, covering the lower part of his arm thing. I drew that, and suddenly I figured out what it was supposed to look like. So yeah, sometimes it's really easy to focus too much on the anatomy and not so much as what looks nice. And I should probably add that it's not a great way to go about it if you don't really feel confident drawing the human body, but it is definitely a nice alternative way of drawing certain aspects, especially if you feel stuck with a certain part of a drawing or feel uninspired or frustrated with getting the anatomy just right. But yes, if you're just starting out figuring out how to draw, it's probably wise not to draw the clothing first, but instead figuring out what the body looks like. And as you saw earlier, I had already sketched out the basic shapes of the arm and where it would go more or less, so it was just a matter of getting it to look just right. And focusing on the clothing helped me in that aspect. I decided to change the clothing at his back in the end, because when I tried to add some fabric there, it looked a bit fluffy, and I didn't really like it. So instead I decided to add a scarf or a cape or something, because I love capes. Just because it added a nice frame around his body and added some movement to the back as well. And I made certain to attach the cape or scarf or whatever it is to his shoulder by adding a bit of detail there, just to make sure it looked like it was incorporated into the drawing and not just added on. So yes, it solved the problem of figuring out where his clothing would be sticking out near his lower back. And yes, sometimes it's nice to just sort of cheat your way out of certain situations, certain parts of drawings that look weird, by adding some extra clothing or detail. That is, I think, why a lot of people seem to be putting their hands in their pockets on many drawings. That's simply to avoid drawing hands altogether. Speaking of hands, I have now drawn everything else on the body, including the tattoos on the face, and I simply have to add in the hand. Sometimes I get really lazy and I just add in some sketchy strokes and call it a day, but if I like my drawing, I need to add in the hand as well, and so it doesn't look unfinished. So yes, googling some references, and I'm really bad at using references, and it's not that I don't like them or I can't figure out how to draw from them, but it's just that I get too caught up in my drawing and I simply forget to stop and use references, which is not good. So it's only if I'm really stuck on a certain aspect, like here for instance, and I simply cannot figure it out, then I start to find references. So I need to get better at that, because references are the best tool. They're really useful, and yeah, go use them. The last thing I did was to add in a bit of a background. I wanted to make some interesting designs, and I tried several different things, and I like one of them, and I spent a lot of time trying to get it right, but in the end, just no, didn't work out. So we skipped that part because trust me, it's really boring, and instead I decided to just do a boring square background, just to add something there to make the person stand out a bit more. And yes, it was also after midnight, so I was really tired at this point. I think I just wanted to finish it and go to bed. So yes. I struggled a bit with the shading until I figured out that I could simply zoom out, because then it would be easy to fill in the space. And as you can see, the drawing is actually quite tiny because I'm stupid, and I think it's done on an A4 size canvas, so it's really tiny. I mean, that's fine, it's just a sketch, but I really need to get better at noticing this before I add too much detail, so I can create a larger canvas to work on before continuing. But luckily it was not a commission or anything, or something that needed to be printed, so it's all good. So finally I'll just add a bit of extra shading along the back, and yes, I think that's it. I think in the end I did go back to this piece and added in some lines on the other side of him, just because I had completely forgotten that he's supposed to have two hands, or you know, just something there. So yes, just a few extra lines there, which you can't see here. But yes, it's done, and I hope you liked it, and leave a comment if you would like more like this or something different, and let me know. And of course, thanks for watching.